Before we dive into today's episode, I have something truly special to share. Next September, I'll be leading an intimate women's retreat through the south of France and northern Italy, and you're invited. Picture this: mornings exploring the colorful markets of the French Riviera, afternoons sipping wine, and a hotel view with golden Mediterranean sunsets. Whether you love photography, food, or just want to reconnect with your playful creative self, this trip is designed for you. Spots are limited, so if all this sounds like your kind of adventure, please visit tourwithabsolutely.com and look for the tour France and Italy with Crystal. You can also send me a message or check out the show notes. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway. Welcome back to Paris History Avec a Hemingway. I'm back with Claudine, and today we're talking about the painting that inspired the Impressionist movement. And I'm sure Claudine has a lot to tell us about it.
I do have a lot about this one, and it's one that we are going to talk in the next couple of weeks also about the big anniversary that the Impressionists are celebrating right now. But I really love this story because I'm going to tell you some things that I rarely ever seen anywhere mentioned about this painting.
Top secret information.
Top secret. So 150 years ago this month, the very first Impressionist exhibition opened. Although it went by a very different and much longer name, it was known as the Limited Company of Artists, Painters, Sculptors, Engravers, etc., and was established on December 27th, 1873 by Monet, Pissarro, Renoir, Sisley, and Belliard. The last guy, pretty much nobody's going to know that name, but he was an important part of it. On April 15th, 1874, in the former photography studio of Nadar, the exhibition opened to a small crowd. The first 10 days were quiet until a gentleman named Louis Leroy from the Chevalier attended and wrote an article that was published on April 25th, 1874. This exhibition went for one whole month. And again, I will tell you more about it in the next couple of weeks. But this is kind of the real pivotal piece of the whole story of why we even call it Impressionism or the Impressionists, everything. And it was basically down to this one guy, Louis Leroy. So he wrote on April 25th, Impressionism, I was sure. I also thought to myself, since I am impressed, there must be an impression in it. And what freedom, what ease in the bill. The wallpaper in this embryonic state is even more done than this. He was an artist and an engraver himself, and he was being a bit harsh, but everyone at the time was against this band of rebels, these artists that had come out away from what was the acceptable art at the time and decided to do their own thing. So at this time, the academic world thought that, everything about these guys, they're starting to paint outside. And there's reasons why that, because they basically, it was the first time you could get paint in tubes. So you could actually go outside and take the paint with you. But at the time, everybody thought these people were crazy. We talked, I think it was probably about a year ago, we talked about the romantic period, which is my man Delacroix. But before that, like all the guys before that, the neoclassical and the academic painters were like, what are these guys doing? So it's just a story that continues to go round and round. But the one about the Impressionists is probably the most famous.
Yeah, and I think most people today would say like they love Impressionist paintings, and like that's why the Orsay is always so busy. So it's like our favorites in today's world too.
Yeah, and I think this is definitely, I think if anything, if you ask people that don't, they might say, I don't know a lot about art, but they know Impressionists and they also know Van Gogh. Those are kind of the two. And so it was, but at the time, which is so funny when you think about this wasn't a successful period for them. And so we will talk more about the exhibition in the next few weeks. It's going on at the Orsay until July. But this week, I want to share the story of the painting that named the movement with a few surprising turns that as I said, I never see mentioned. So this painting was, of course, done by a gentleman named Claude Monet, which everybody knows. And last week, we did a replay of the three-way love affair of Monet, his first wife, Camille, and Alice. And Alice husband kind of plays a part in this situation. But Monet was born on November 14th, 1840 in Paris at number 45, number 45 Rue Lafitte, a place later famous for its art galleries that supported the Impressionists. In 1845, the Monet family moved to Le Havre, and at 11, he began to sketch in the margins of his school books, and he did caricatures of people in the town. After his mother died in 1857, he turned to focus on full-time art and returned to Paris in 1859. For years, Monet struggled to make money. He borrowed from many of his friends after his father cut him off because of his relationship with Camille. One of the most famous paintings in the Orsay, Déjeuner sur l'herbe, was his own response to Manet's version, and was used as collateral for a house he rented and was almost destroyed because he just never had any money. So this, as a collateral, he said, here's a painting, hold on to this. With at the time, he wasn't, Claude Monet, quote unquote. So the guy that owned the house just rolled it up and threw it in the basement. And then years later, when he got it back, it was really kind of eaten away by mildew and mold, and they had to cut pieces of it away. And so that is how it's displayed at the Orsay. Only one piece of it is there right now. Normally it's two pieces, but the other piece is traveling around Paris at the moment. But it is kind of interesting when you think of Monet. In 1868, he attempted to kill himself by jumping into the Seine when his financial difficulties became too much. It's hard to imagine that now just about every museum in the world owns a Claude Monet painting. It got to the point where even in Portland, Oregon, I was like, oh, big deal, there's a haystack. But in 2019, a Monet haystack painting sold for $110 million.
Whoa, what?
Yeah. So from the guy that tried to jump off this bridge and to kill himself in the Seine to now, a painting is going for $110 million. It's quite a big difference. But the most important painting of what is known as the Impressionist movement, because it named that, still wasn't even that big of a deal. And even today, it's definitely not the Mona Lisa, but it is a very important piece to have. So on November 13th, 1872, at exactly 7:35 a.m. in the harbor of Le Havre, out the window of the Hotel de l'Admiralty at number 43 on the Grand Quai, Monet captured a sunrise, a quick passing moment in time on a quiet morning. The exact date and time was deducted by researchers at the Musée Marmottan Monet in the last 5 years by consulting tide charts and the weather history, and also noticing that the smoke from the smokestacks was flowing west, nailed the exact moment of the day.
That's
Over
cool.
100,
Wow. I love those
100.
paintings.
I know, over 150 years ago, they could figure that out. Mind you, weather keeping is probably no different or any better now than it was in 1872, but they were able to figure this out. Also, it just happened to be the day before the color master's birthday. So on that early morning, as Monet looked out his window, his easel at the ready, he saw in the distance through the foggy horizon the Quai de Bois on the left of the canvas, the transatlantic lock in the center, and the Corbeil dock on the right. Today, much of that view has changed, sadly, and the hotel is no longer there, so you can't really go down there and just be like, oh, yes, it's exactly where it is. And it's, of course, this painting is, it's the impression. So it's kind of the look of it being, this is the impression of the view. He worked really quickly with the paint, and he layered on one layer after another. This very wet. The predominantly gray and blue scale painting's most important element was added later after the painting had completely dried. So there's a glowing orange sun rising over the dock, and it gives a reflection across the water. And if you looked at this painting without that, if you just look at it and imagine, you could go to my website and look at I'll put a bunch of pictures of it. It would just be, you would just be like, oh, it's a Monet, it's lovely, but it doesn't have that beautiful orange sun that gives you the impression of the sunrise.
When I think of those paintings, it's like when you go to the Louvre, it's always like, oh, I'm just looking at another picture of the king or, the church or Jesus. And like, it's the first time you're just seeing all this beautiful nature.
Yeah, it is definitely. And if you do go, when you do go to the Louvre, Um, if you go to the second floor of the Sully wing and you go and take the elevator up and you go to the right, and it's all chronological. If you go to the right, it's basically where the Louvre ends, which is 1848. And you start to look at those first rooms of Corot and Millet and Delacroix, and you could definitely see how that was about to turn and get to Impressionism because you do start to see these natural landscapes. You see portraits that are full length portraits of women standing in these beautiful dresses. And you definitely could see, like, oh, yeah, this is what we're about ready to go into, which is really kind of cool.
Definitely cool.
So in 1874, when this was presented for the first exhibition, Monet was asked to give a title to the painting for the catalog. He says, "It can't really pass for a view of Le Havre," I answered. "Put impression." So Monet captured this landscape of Le Havre many times, even with view of the same window. One scene is at the J. Paul Getty Museum in LA, and the another one is at the Musée Barberie in Germany. The one at the J. Paul Getty Museum, it is basically almost that view without the sunrise, which is interesting. The exhibition was held from April 15th to May 15th, 1874, in the studio of photographer Nadar that was on the Boulevard de Capucine. Wealthy Parisian Ernest Hochaday arrived one day and found a painting that spoke to him and purchased it immediately for 800 francs, which was about 3,500 euros today. Hochaday was born in Paris on December 18th, 1837, in the ninth to a family that made their fortune in the textile industry and department stores. By 1861, Ernest was the head of the family business and the bank account. And on April 16th, 1863, he married Alice, who came from a wealthier family and also came with a chateau 11 miles outside of Paris in Montgers. The Chateau de Rotembourg needed an update, and Ernest used his large checkbook to invite the artist to come to decorate the walls. Manet had already gone there, and they were all at the Café Gerbois, and they talked about it. And Monet said, "Oh, I should go out there." So they reached out to each other, and then he went out there and started painting. And if you listened to the love triangle last week, you know what happened. But in 1876, 2 years after the exhibition, after spending time in Argenteuil, Claude Monet wanted to find some new subject matter to paint. So this is when he went to the French businessman Hochaday and decided to go out there to paint on the walls. Not only did they paint on the walls as just decoration, but he also created paintings. One of my favorite ones that's in the Orsay is the one Monet did that's turkeys. But he did quite a few pieces that he didn't pay for, and Monet ended up keeping some of them with him. Hochaday met Monet when they were in the Parc Monceau and offered him the same opportunity. So he went on out there and, was painting and then starting a little affair with Hochaday's wife, Alice. And so he would go out there, and that would be hanging on the wall, would be his impression sunrise. In retrospect, it was such a monumental moment, but barely registered a mention for more than 100 years.
100 years? What's going on here?
Yeah, so again, it's no Mona Lisa. So Ernest buzzed through all of his money. He was forced to hold two anonymous auctions, a few dozen paintings by Cicely, Monet, and Pissarro that didn't reap the rewards he had hoped. In 1877, his chateau and collection was seized and sold. 138 pieces. Renoir, Cicely, Morisot, Pissarro, Manet, and Monet were sold, including the Impression Sunrise. It sold at auction for only 210 francs.
What
So
a
he bought
deal.
it for 800 and it sold it for 210. Dr. Georges de Belliot was the lucky winner of such a bargain. And at the time, the market was flooded with impressionists and few were buying them. He drove the value of many of them down and left many of the artists pretty bitter because it was this flash sale of like everything must go. And everybody was like, why do we want these? And now they're on every corner. But de Belliot was a Bucharest art collector born on February 20th, 1828, who moved to Paris. He became a naturopathic doctor, opening a small shop when he wasn't amassing his art, which is kind of funny to think there was a naturopathic art doctor in 1828.
I love my naturopath.
Yeah. He had one child. Her name was Victorine. She was born in 1863 and would add her name to the long story of Monet's sunrise. Bellio and Monet began a friendship over letters and vowed to keep the painting until his death. He frequently asked for money. Monet always repaid the doctor in art, a deal that was very beneficial for de Bellio. His collection would include everything from Botticelli, Hubert Robert, Delacroix, Manet, and Morisot. On January 26, 1894, he died, and his entire collection was passed down to his daughter, Victorine, and her husband, Eugène de Nope de Monqui. The two lived at number 6 Rue de l'Abbé on the corner of the Rue de Furstenberg, which is also where my man Delacroix lived and his museum. Impression hung on the wall alongside Le Gare Saint-Lazare and Le Pont de l'Europe, which were the real stars of the collections, and they were highly sought after for exhibitions. So records show that the two were highly insured, as much as 250,000 francs, but the Impression Sunrise rarely was asked for exhibitions, and it was insured for under 15,000 francs.
That's crazy.
Very crazy. A painting that is so highly linked to one of the most beloved schools of painting in the world didn't matter. In 1939, as Hitler was coming to Western Europe, thirsty for art, it wasn't just the Louvre that sprung into action, but Jacques Jouard, one of my favorites, also assisted other museums, including the Musée Marmottan Monet, and the collectors in protecting their art. The Marmottan is a amazing little museum at the very edge of Paris. It was originally the hunting lodge to the Duc de Valmy, and it was purchased in 1882 by a gentleman named Jules Marmottan, who had a huge collection of items from the First Empire. His son Paul expanded the collection, and upon his death, the whole collection was given to the Académie des Beaux-Arts. In 1934, it was opened as a museum, and over the years, would be greatly enhanced by two generous donations. Victorine had already talked to the museum that she wanted a gift of a portion of the collection to go to the museum and also put into a room that would be named after her father. Director Henri Lariche urged her to add her paintings to the convoy heading down to the Chateau de Chambord in September of 1938. But after the Munich Agreement was signed, they thought that point everything was fine, that everything it was the plans were canceled and the painting stayed. But as we know, exactly a year later, at the end of August 1939, the two cases of her paintings were sent to the Chateau de Laurie, a location specifically chosen by the Marmottan. Victorine sent 6 Monets, a handful of Pissarro, Sicily, Morisot, and Renoir, and of course, the Impression Sunrise, would basically spend the entire time of the war next to the collection of the Louvre. During the war in 1940, she decided to give the 2 cases of paintings to the Marmottan, with them going to the room for her father. Her husband died during the war in 1942, and another gift valued at over 4 million francs and included Chinese pottery, furniture, and more paintings was given. Although the Academy of Art, the Académie des Beaux-Arts, decided to say, nope, not so fast. So the Marmottan is run by the Institut de France and the Academy and has the right of refusal of donations. So this whole law that was put into place before Picasso died that made it okay for people to, in lieu of inheritance taxes, to donate art, because the taxes on the estate of Picasso was going to be so high, they worked it out that you could give art. But it's not just, here's my art, have a good time. It's, you could give the art, but they get to have the right of refusal of what they want and what they deem acceptable.
That's crazy. Like that, what a setup.
Yeah. So they felt that her asking for a room to be named after her father was a bit too far, and they refused the whole donation. So over the next few years, the lawyers and even the Minister of Education stepped in, and after rewriting the donation in 1947, it was accepted but reduced to just 10 paintings and a few objets d'art. On February 29th, 1949, at 4 p.m., the collection was inaugurated. It was only the 4th time the Impressionist sunrise was ever seen, although it still only went by the word just impression. So, although few were impressed when they saw it,
Definitely.
it's pretty funny. To celebrate the 100th anniversary of the exhibition in 1974, a woman that I definitely need to know more about, Hélène Adimar, she was a curator of the Louvre and the Jeu de Paume. She organized a temporary exhibition She wrote a catalog that included the very first time there was a full page reproduction of the sunrise. In 1946, John Raywald had wrote the first comprehensive history of the Impressionists and mentioned the moment Louis Leroy coined the term, but still did not give, the painting a Mona Lisa status. Arguably, it's still pretty unknown and only recently mentioned because of the 150th anniversary of the exhibition. Much like though the Mona Lisa, as we know, she was stolen. Guess what? So was the Impression Sunrise.
Well, I didn't. No one ever talks about it though. Why?
Nope. And I even have a book that's all about just the painting because in 2016, 17, the Marmaton did an exhibition all around this one painting. It does not mention it at all. So, but of course, because I am a dog with a bone and I can't ever give up, I find the information.
We love
So
that
it was,
about you.
I know, but this is why I go on weird, like I made notes when I was doing this research and I look back and include with Helene's name and I have all these other things. And I was like, what exactly does this mean? Because I find things and I'm like, I got to look more into that. And then because I've got to try to stay focused. So
Yeah.
there will be more. So it was an early Sunday morning, just after 10 a.m. on October 27th, 1985. Two ticket holding gents strolled into the Marmottan Monet, and a few minutes later, three masked men with guns pushed their way in, forced everyone to the ground, and quickly searched out 9 specific paintings they ripped from the wall. There was 2 Renoirs, a painting by our favorite, Bert Morisot, and 5 Monets that included Impression Sunrise. They were gone in a matter of minutes.
Wow. I can't believe they just came in, took them off the wall, and walked out.
And this is 1985. This is not that long ago.
Not at all.
No. So for 2 years, there wasn't a single lead, much like the Mona Lisa, until the commissioner of the art theft department, Muriel Balistrazen, tracked down 4 stolen Cortot paintings in Japan. They were stolen from Eastern France in 1984. The paintings were linked to the head of the Japanese crime syndicate, Fujikama. Fujikama had his hands in everything, and in 1978, he was caught with over 7 kilos of heroin in France and sentenced to 5 years in prison in France. He was locked away, and while he was there, as they do, like in every movie, he met 2 other French prisoners locked away for art theft. Two gentlemen named Philippe Jamin and Youssef Kimon, and he hatched a plan. Fast forward to 1987, and the detective was paying a visit to Japan. The Cortos were recovered with a series of investigations of his phone records and found some odd details. It didn't help that they found the Marmottan Museum catalog where he had circled each of the 9 paintings that were then stolen. Somehow, these paintings were taken from Paris to Japan, then sent to Corsica, and they were discovered in an empty villa in Porto Vecchio.
Whoa.
Yes,
Just sitting in a villa.
just sitting in a villa. Took 3 long years to get them, to recover them, take them back to the Marmottan. On April 17th, 1991, after some minor restorations, they returned to the walls of the Marmottan, and you could see them in all their glory. Impression Sunrise sits downstairs when it's not at the Orsay at the moment, on the lower level, and you can't miss it as you walk down the stairs. When I first saw it, in 2016, you weren't allowed to take pictures, but of course, I was like, I have to have a picture with it. And so I took a picture, sneaky picture with your phone. Then the next time I went, I think like the next year, it was already like you could take pictures, whatever you want. But make sure you go and you sit on the little bench and watch it. But I think it's amazing the fact that it was stolen and it literally is never mentioned,
Yeah,
which is
like maybe it's just very embarrassing now.
yeah, and it wasn't that long ago. But you would also think it's very interesting because you look at the whole reason why everybody freaks out to see the Mona Lisa is because she was stolen. But maybe they should play up this Impression Sunrise.
Yeah, they'll get more people.
Maybe they'll get more people. But when it comes to art, it's not just the painting you see on the canvas. That's so fascinating. It's the stories with the twists and turns are all those things that I love. In 1966, Michael Monet, the only surviving child of the great artist, gave his entire collection which is the largest concentrated catalog of Monet in the world, is held at the Marmottan Monet. And in 1985, a woman named Nellie Duham, which was the daughter of Henri Duham, bequeathed her father's vast Impressionist and post-Impressionist paintings to the Marmottan. The Marmottan is kind of on the very edge of the 16th, almost going into the Bois de Boulogne, and it's open Tuesday to Sunday, and they hold two fantastic exhibitions a year. I think I saw earlier this year they had one about Bert Morisot and the Rococo period, that because she would go into the Louvre and copy those. That was amazing. And then they had one of Julie Manet, the daughter of Bert. An exhibit about that was fantastic. But right now, the Impression Sunrise is at the Orsay. That is for the exhibition, and it's actually going to travel outside of Paris and go to Washington, D.C. to be seen at the National Gallery when the exhibition moves there. I think it's September, but it's pretty amazing that this painting, that the whole reason we call it impressionism is because of this painting, but I don't think for the most part many people actually know that.
Yeah, I had no idea. I love that story.
It's pretty cool. And so now, but it's funny. So you go into the exhibition, and I'll talk more about it here in the next couple weeks. But it's against this gorgeous royal blue navy wall. And so when you see it, because like I was saying, it's predominantly like light blues and grays, and then you have this beautiful orange sun really pops in the gold frame on this blue wall, but it has its own guard sitting there, just sitting there watching it, and everybody kind of comes in and looks at it. And it's pretty fantastic. But I kind of wish they would kind of also tell the whole story. I mean, even I have the exhibition book, it doesn't mention the theft. As I was saying, the exhibition book about just that one painting from years ago doesn't mention the theft. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, like who decided to hide that information?
I know. I mean, it's a thing that, I was just talking to some clients yesterday about that with even like the Louvre and the Orsay. There's paintings there that, were stolen by the Germans, and then, they were ended up returned thanks to our girl Rose Valland, but then later given to the French, government, and again, probably because of, inheritance taxes. It comes into the collection, but they don't put any of that information out there. And the provenance of a painting, no matter what it is, good or bad, is part of its story. And that should be there regardless. And the Louvre and the Orsay, it's not always so great about what those exact details are. And I really think they should.
Yeah, and like you said, maybe more people would come because now the Mona Lisa is super famous for that.
Yeah, I mean, that's, exactly. It's like everybody goes to, and, I just had somebody the other day asking me, well, why? And so I heard something, they were saying that I was listening to this podcast that I really like, that's really funny. And the girl on it's like, well, the reason why the Mona Lisa is so famous because she doesn't have eyebrows. And I was listening to this and walking, and I was like, what in the world?
That's so funny.
I'm like, not exactly because she doesn't have eyebrows. And then I was like, wait a minute, does she not have eyebrows?
Yeah, it makes me double think. I'm like, wait, she
I know, because
does?
you just looking, but it is I just think it's so interesting that they don't really ever bring up the story of how it was stolen. And I mean, it was recovered and gone for over 2 years. I just see if I could find anything about in the French papers during those 2 years, if they ever talked about it and ever were like, oh, it's still missing, kind of like it was with the Mona Lisa.
Yeah, definitely. Like they've definitely hidden it very well.
Yeah, and I would put Monet. I mean, if I would say in some ways more people probably know who Monet is than they do Da Vinci.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, Da Vinci, I think everybody could, I think Mona Lisa, I think everybody pretty much in the world could say they've heard or seen a picture of the Mona Lisa. And Monet, I mean, he, hundreds and hundreds of paintings compared to Da Vinci's 13.
Yeah, it definitely makes a huge difference.
So yeah, it's pretty interesting. But we'll talk some more in the next couple weeks about the 1874 and the Impressionist exhibits in and of themselves.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in. Head on over to ClaudineHemingway.com and tune in next week. Thanks for listening today, guys. If you're interested in learning more about Claudine, her tours, history, and the beautiful photographs that she posts all over Instagram, tune into her website, claudinehemingway.com.